Yeah, old school. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, this ain't for everybody. Some of y'all need to hear this. I know you're in the trenches fighting, but check it out. I'm gonna put it down like this so I can help the saints understand. Everything you're going through is all part of the master plan. Or what? You thought cause you got saved everything was gonna be peaches and cream? You better wake up, son. Don't nothing come to a sleeper but a dream. Faith without works is dead. Read your Bible, you know what it said. He who don't work don't eat. Blackers don't get fed. Yeah, Jesus said he who puts his hand to the plow looks back the same ain't fit. Some of y'all ain't been in the trenches 5 minutes and you about ready to quit. I ain't mad at ya, I'm just hitting you with the real. If you died for me and I was still tripping, now how you think that make you feel? Check this out, deep game, this here's deep. Some of y'all ain't sawing nothing but you started trying to reach. But unto him who is able to possess your fathers by his glory. Struggles might be part of your testimony, but it ain't the end of the story. Now upon this was prophesied way back in the day. Choir, sing your hook right here and see if the church can relate.
I know we can make it. Oh, we can make it. I know good and well. God can work it out. Work it out. Work it out. Yeah, he'll work it out. I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. God can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yeah.
Thinking not strange, the fiery trials will to try you. You say, why you? But your church say, what would Jesus do? Why you asking if he ain't trying to do what he's saying? He told you he was going to have tribulations, but you thought he was playing. 1 minute you tell him how good God is and can't nobody beat the talk. The next minute you're backsliding so fast, it's like you're moonwalking. Oh yeah, I'm preaching to myself because I ain't no better. It ain't like I've been following his every word, obeying it to the letter. But we soldiers, we got to remember that. Regroup, stay on point. Yeah, bow down, confess, repent, stay humble, let him anoint. It ain't easy as I thought it was. I'd be lying if I told you that. But it showed up getting better all the time. Trust me, that's the fact. Ain't nothing we going through that can't be handled. God put that on his son. Like they say, you can shout now if you want to, cause the battle's already won. So while you're going through the valley, don't even trip. You're gonna be on top. Choir, sing the hook line one more again. This time you don't stop.
I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. God can work it out.
Welcome, everyone. We're gonna pump the brakes right there. I just had to give a couple minutes to Big Boy upstairs, and it's my hope and wish that with his divine guidance, we're going to make it through this thing called life. And we hope you see it the same way we do, because we're going to keep giving prayers and big ups to everybody out there that's going through a whole bunch of trials and tribulations that haven't woke up quite yet. Welcome, your host, Lamont Patterson, and you are listening to Can a Player Play? And we definitely have a great show lined up for you today. We have Miss Elizabeth Graybill is going to be joining us here in a couple seconds. She's an author of Unbreakable Me, Still I Rise. She's also the founder of Our Voice Matters, a therapeutic life coaching company that focuses on high-risk young adults in the prison system, and which is definitely needed. She's also a survivor of child molestation and sexual abuse and drug addiction, and those are definitely some of the inner-city traps that catch up a lot of youth that lead them into the penal situation, which is, what is the third largest business in the country, you know. But anyway, we're going to get in that in a moment. So I'm going to see, is our guest with us? Hello, Miss Graybill, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad. You definitely have a wealth of information. I'm so glad that you could come and do this show. There's so many people out there in the world that has, gone through some similar things, such as yourself, and don't know where to look, don't know what to do, and don't have the strength or any support whatsoever that's going to help them. So hopefully after listening to the show today, people have some direction and somewhere to go to get help.
Absolutely.
So I guess we can start off with you giving our listeners, I gave you a brief introduction about who you are. Well, I guess you could tell people a little bit more about you than I can.
Well, yeah, I guess, right? Well, it's good to be here, and I appreciate, you reaching out to me because I believe that, some of the some of the experiences that I've been through and some of the trauma and the struggle, it's a situation that happens all around the world, and not everybody is so willing to be straightforward about their situation because of whatever the situation is. It could be the shame, the guilt, the remorse, the fear of judgment and stuff like that. So I really appreciate having the format to be able to share, my experience. And I'm somebody who grew up in New York, and for the most part, my upbringing was a little chaotic. Family was very dysfunctional, and not only, was all of those things going on, but also I grew up in a time, I was born in a time where race mixing wasn't, totally accepted, and not to say that it's totally accepted now, but, back then it was a big thing, and so, I am a mixed, my mother's white and my father's black, and it caused a lot of I don't know how to put it, separation maybe between my family because it wasn't really, accepted. So I got shunned a lot, growing up.
On which side? On which side was it accepted?
On my mother's side because, the story is so long. But anyway, listen, when I was, when I was born, my mom had some mental, situations going on in her life, and I didn't know who my father was, and actually I never knew who he was until maybe last year. I found out like the whole entire story. But I grew up with my mom and her family, and my mom is white, so I grew up in a white setting, and not really being able to identify and fit in. It was very, very difficult for me because I grew up in this place where nothing looked like me, right? And it really, I think, started that trajectory of me, trying to figure out who I was and trying so much to fit in and be accepted, in a time where, it wasn't accepted. The race thing wasn't accepted, and it wasn't accepted with some of my family. Unfortunately, racism has been a thing in my family, and it still is. So, yeah, it was difficult. It was very difficult. And I think that's, where my story truly began. It was trying to find ways to not feel, the way I was feeling back then, wanting so much to be a part and loving my family, because they were my family, but not being able to get the love back that I thought that I deserved. And so it was a struggle. It was a struggle. And, I think the biggest thing for me was I was willing at, one point in my life, I was willing to accept some of the treatment that I took because I just wanted them to love me. So it was hard. It was difficult hearing, the N-word coming out of, your family's mouth and, in a regular conversation, and you're like, you're there, and you're just like, you don't know how to respond to that, like how to act, or, it was just so awkward, being in that situation. So I think that's where a lot of my problems began. I think it really started like way back then, and, trying to, not having enough love for myself, because I think it got to the point for me where I hated myself so much, for being who I was and not being or looking or, being accepted by that part of my life, that I wanted to erase everything about me. you know, if that makes any sense, you know. So, yeah, it was difficult.
I'm trying to, that is a difficult situation. I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I'm thinking, being biracial, who would you really want to be if you're not really getting love from who you know your family is? So how would you know who you wanted to identify with? I guess that could be confusing.
Well, it really was. And, you know, and then I think of, you know, when I got older, because it was so painful, you know, it became so painful. And, you know, when you're young, you really can't articulate how you feel. But as I got older in my, you know, early teens, late teens, early 20s, then I started to realize and notice and understand what all it was that I was feeling. And so, you know, the pain of that was so unbearable at times that I tried to find ways to not feel, you know. And, of course, you know, you're young, you're hanging out, you're experimenting with all these things. You know, so the first time that I was able to experience this high, right, which kind of took me away from all that other stuff, you know, it immediately I became addicted, you know, and, you don't realize it, I guess, back then, but it was this temporary kind of fix, this temporary feel-good. And I think that I felt so bad about myself that I just wanted to feel okay. You know, I just wanted to be able to exist in my own skin. And unfortunately, drugs and alcohol, you know, helped me do that, you know, and it helped me do that. And I have to say this, it helped me do it, but it helped me do it, you know, it was a temporary kind of thing, you know. And so, of course, with drug addiction, you know, the high never lasts forever, right? So you want to continue to try to continue to get that feeling. And so, yeah, it kind of just spiraled out of control. And, but, yeah, it just had a lot to do with, you know, this crisis I was going through, this identity crisis. And unfortunately, you know, even when, and listen, I grew up around a very multi-environment. And what was really unfortunate for me was that it was very hard to be accepted on both sides of the aisle, because it was either I wasn't white enough or I wasn't black enough. Right? So I struggled with both sides, and I got some grief from both sides, believe it or not. So yeah, it was just crazy. It was crazy.
Why don't you just, hey, look, well, you're fortunate now because those whole stereotypes done changed. Now you're in high demand now.
Yeah, ain't that something?
Yeah.
Something.
So,
you know, but
yeah. So Elizabeth, I can understand how that could spiral into the drug addiction, because basically when you went into it, it was a coping mechanism. And
absolutely.
It was a coping mechanism which allowed you to, like you said, feel better with all the things that you were going through, but all the while not knowing that it was taking you down a whole nother path that you really didn't want to go down.
Absolutely. It was, oh man, it was something that I will say that I always pray and wish that no one ever has to really experience. And you're right, it took me down this other place where I subjected myself to so many other tragedies. It opened the floodgates to almost, I want to say hell, you know.
Right.
And
well, that was taking me into my next question for you, because, well, actually it's a two-part question. And the child molestation, was that prior to or during the same time you dealing with these other things?
Well, the child molestation, I was around 6 years old, and so that was something else too. Besides the differences with the racism and being biracial, also, I experienced child molestation. So, and it was a friend of the family, And I talked a little bit about it in my book. And what the unfortunate thing was about that, and I could admit it now, is that back then, I'll never forget this. They used to call this man, his name was Captain Bill. I remember this, right? And he used to come around and he would make me do things. And what was so sad was that I don't think I had a fear back then. I don't remember being fearful, but what I do kind of remember was he was the only one that really paid attention to me, right? And so I think as a child, you've got somebody who's pretending to, love you and care about you, and, and I think that as a child, I looked at, I seen that part of it, I think I knew in somewhere inside of me, and again, I was a child, so you're really not able to articulate what you're feeling, but I knew, a part of me knew it was wrong. But then there was this other part of me that was like, sometimes happy to see this person because I never got the attention that he gave me, because again, there was a racial divide in my family. And, so the little bit of attention, it was like any attention was good attention, even if it was negative, right? So, I recall that. And how sad is that, How sad is that, that a young child, that is feeling alone, and I felt very alone. And when somebody, unfortunately, a damn pedophile, right, showed me a little bit of, and that's what they do, right? So they always got to bait you and kind of groom you into liking them and, trusting them. And so he did that. And so, yeah, it was just a sad thing, sad.
The second part of my question is, do you feel like that scarred you in some way moving forward?
Yeah, I do. I think that, again, somewhere in me, in that little mind of mine, back then I knew that it was wrong. And it wasn't the first time, because I had also been molested by another family friend, and it was a woman. And I think that, again, as I got older and I started to realize these things that had happened to me, and, how wrong they were. And, yeah, it took me on this other, journey where, even that became so painful to even think about, being violated in that way. And I think it hit me even harder when I had my first child, looking at my daughter and thinking, oh, my God, the things that had happened to me, it just made my skin, like, to think that somebody would do something like that to my own child, really, really had a very, very bad effect on me. Yeah, it did.
So what did you do? How did you deal with those emotions?
Well, how I dealt with those things was by using. I mean, it was drugs and alcohol, always, Alcohol became a really big issue in my life, and so that was my kind of, getting away from that feeling. It helped me not really forget. Well, it helped me to focus on other stuff and not think about that so much. But again, my addiction went through different phases. It was alcohol. It was heroin, and I did whatever I had to do not to feel the pain that I was feeling from all of my experiences, growing up. It was just too painful to sit and to really sit down with myself and think about what had been done to me, It just was. And so that was my out. That was my out. That was my release. That was the way I did not have to deal with it. Yeah.
Well, what point? I guess what point? I guess my mind is all over the place now because I always think. I think like an alien sometimes. So
that's okay.
dealing with the drugs and the alcohol, which actually I understand was brought on to by the other trauma that you were dealing with. But at what point did you hit the brick wall and decide that you wasn't going to do that anymore?
Well, it was a lot of trial by error, right? It was a lot of trying and failing and trying because I had made up my mind a few times, and I think that I think emotionally and mentally and physically I was really tired of doing it. Maybe 20 years ago, right? But it was so I became so accustomed to it. I became so accustomed to using those things as a coping mechanism with anything that was going on in my life, right? Anything that I couldn't deal with, that was my go-to. And I think almost now, well, I'm coming up on 10 years. 10 years ago, I don't know, something changed in me. I didn't want, I knew at one point, and I can't even pinpoint at what point it was, but I knew that the life and the way that I was living, that it was just like I had to do something because I think it, started to really, wear on me that I was going to die in this situation. Like there was no good possible outcome that was going to happen for me if I continued. However, knowing it and doing something about it when you're so far in is two different things because it's not an easy, journey to go on. To say, okay, I'm just going to deal with everything head on and I'm going to be okay with that. So, I think that over time, the drugs and alcohol stopped working. It didn't work anymore for me. It actually amplified a lot of what was going on with me to the point where it just didn't work anymore. And so I really needed to make a decision. And, and I think the only decision and the only thing that I had in front of me that I was looking at that point was it's either, you're going to try to live the rest of your life, doing something productive and helping yourself and healing yourself, or the other, option you have is you're going to die in this addiction. And I'll never forget, it was August 12th of 2012. I went on a drinking binge, and I woke up that Saturday morning, and this is a true story, and I was in a fetal position, and I was paralyzed, and I wanted to die. I wanted to know. I was questioning God about why He even woke me up. And it was such a scary feeling, and I can't get into all the details because I can't even explain what I was feeling. But I mean, immediately I started praying, and I asked God to please, because I couldn't live like that anymore. It was so, oh my gosh, it was just so chaotic and insane, and and so I just, I remember that Saturday. It was just, I don't know, something clicked. God really stepped into my life, and and I remember and I've made God a lot of promises before, I want to say, that I was going to stop if He just helped me to get through something,
Well, you say so, you made a lot of promises.
I did, and I have to admit that I was one that always, oh God, if you get me through this, I promise you I won't do it again. And so that was the kind of stuff that I would do. But that day was different. And I just asked for the strength to be able to get through the feelings that I was going through in that moment of despair, of degradation, of shame and, guilt. And so I just, if He would get me through that, if I could just make it through, I was going to do something to change. And, lo and behold, come that Monday morning, I winded up going into a NA meeting, And I have not stopped going to those meetings since this day, you know, and I never picked up another drug or another drink. And so it was just one of those things that I just cannot explain, but I knew in my heart that I was ready. I was ready, and I think that that's the big thing that people need to know about addiction because, you know, I tried to get clean many a time, but I did it because of all the wrong reasons. You know, I was doing it for other people. I was doing it, you know, to prove to other people I could do it. But all that time that I was doing those things, I really didn't want to stop, right? So it never really lasted. You know, I could do it for, you know, months. I mean, even when I was pregnant. I mean, you know, I had 4 kids, and I was able to stop using drugs then, you know. But my problem was it wasn't really stopping. It was staying stopped for me. You know, because the moment that I had to deal with anything that was traumatic for me, I needed to have something to take me away from that. So, yeah, you know, it's a process. But I think the biggest thing about, you know, recovery is you got to want it, right? You have to want it. You know, that's the only way that this thing works. And so, you know, I tell people, you know, even when I sponsor people, listen, I don't judge, you know, but one of the biggest things that I ask people is, what are you willing to do for your recovery, right? And that was the question that I had to ask myself. What am I willing to do? And, you know, it came down to I was willing to do the same thing that I did for my drugs. I was willing to go that extra mile for my recovery. Because, honey, I went through hoops to get drugs. You know, I mean, I remember being in New York City walking in blizzards, you know, to get some dope, you know. And so you have to be that motivated, you know. And so, yeah, it's a process. You know, it's listen, this thing doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen over time, right? We do recover, not overnight, but over time. You know, we just have to be willing to put in the work.
Well, the things that you've experienced in your life, I mean, you got a wealth of experience, a wealth of things, and people usually learn from people that have actually walked the walk and not necessarily talking the talk. I mean, but how many young ladies that I don't really know of any have gone through child prostitution, sexual assault, you know, and rape. I don't even know how to, you know, to put all those things together and then come out with some semblance of sanity, you know. But you know, you were able to do that, and let's talk about your book a little bit. You know, The Unbreakable Me, Still I Rise, because I'm seeing everything you've gone through, but I'm trying to picture at what point did you decide to get into writing that book about you and your experiences?
Well, yeah. So you know. About 10 years ago, I wanted to, and I always, you know, would sit down and write little things that were on my mind or things that I went through or, you know, something I remembered in my past. And the book thing, you know, has been for years, you know. And, you know, I just never could find a way to begin this story, you know, to tell my story. And I think I struggled with that for like years and years and years until one day somebody said, listen, just write. You know, just write down what you know, just talk about your experiences. You don't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly in order because, you know, I was one of these people, I don't know where to start and I don't know. But, you know, it was just be honest. You know, just say what you need to say, and then you can deal with all the editing and all that other stuff later on, right? So, but about 10 years ago, I wanted to do it, and I just couldn't bring myself to write. And I got in touch. I reached out to some people in New York and about a documentary because I figured, okay, well, you know, right now I'm not in the place where I want to write it, so maybe I can get somebody who's interested in just telling my story, which I did. And actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I do have a documentary that's still in post-production right now about my life, and it takes me back to, I go back to New York, and we kind of talk about all the things that happened, where they happened, and, you know, so on. It deals with the racism issues that went on in my family with my mother's brother, We addressed that in the documentary, what, effects it had on my children. So they participated in it, sharing what their thoughts were and how they felt. So I got this documentary. Hopefully it'll be coming out maybe this year, next year. I don't know. They're still kind of working on some stuff. But that's kind of what inspired me. And I think that, after all of that, I just sat down one day and I said, listen, I have all this stuff, that I've written over the years. I said, so let me just start putting some of this stuff together in order and when it happened, how it happened, And so I kind of did that, and I said, you know what, let's just do it, let's just, put it together. And I still have so much more, This is a short read, and it kind of talks about parts of my experiences with different things with the child prostitution that I found myself in, into at that time. And I think I might have been about 14, 15 years old when that started, being kind of recruited into that, being around older people that weren't doing, the right thing. But yeah, so I just kind of, said, maybe it's just time to just get it out there because, I think a lot of my story and a lot of what I've been through I don't even think, I kind of know that there's so many young women out there and even men at this point that has been through these traumas and been through these things, and it's so difficult to share that, to other people. It's just it's not easy telling someone, this happened to me. So I kind of felt like, what, maybe this will inspire somebody or give somebody the courage to say, me too.
Well, I definitely appreciate and respect the fact that you have the courage and the strength to do that because I understand that one of the biggest tools that the perpetrators have is to try to, shame their victims and not talking about it or telling anybody about it. And I've said several times on this show that, the pedophiles, they get jail sentences. And the children get life, and the children get life sentences.
Yes, Lord, and that is so true. That is so true. And you're right about that. But I think that women, and again men too, because this is not something that just happens with women. There are a lot of cases where this happens with men too. And I don't know if I hear about it as much as women, but, I think one of the things was for me also when I, wrote this book and I shared my experience, and I always share my experience with people, but I think what it does for me is it empowers me. It takes back my power, It helps me to feel like I am in control of this situation, like you said, a lot of times the victims are shamed into silence, so to speak, or they're in fear of, repercussions from sharing something like this. And, this is the most powerful thing that I think a person who has been through something like this, some kind of a trauma like this, to do for themselves is to be able to take back their power and to say, I am not going to be a victim. I am not going to allow you to make me feel like a victim anymore because that's one of the things, too, for me that I kind of lived in for a long time was being that victim, always holding that. And I was a victim, of those circumstances. But when you hold on to that, it stagnates you in your walk. So I had to say to myself, listen, either you're going to be a victim or you're going to be a survivor. And you're going to, and you're going to step up and you're going to say what you have to say and you're going to expose the dirt and the garbage for what it is. And you're going to walk away with your head up and you're going to feel good about that, because not only was I living in that shame and that guilt and that fear, but now I have a way that I can also put that perpetrator on the spot. You know, like you're going to live in that too. You understand? You're not going to walk around here with clean hands and the freedom to do whatever it is that you do and not be detected while I'm walking. You know, so it was one of those empowering moments for me where I was just able to say, you know what, the heck with it. And even with my family, because, you know, I got a little bit of grief about that, you know, what I wrote about the racism and stuff like that. And, you know, of course, people are going to disagree, and I disagreed, you know, with them. And, you know, and I had an opportunity to face them and to share with them what they made me feel like and my experience that, you know, and the way that they made me feel less than, like I wasn't worthy of love. And, you know, so I was able to confront my family about it too, you know, and I'm not going to say that. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and again, even to this day, it's like, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, and everybody's like, no, but that's not the case. But that is the case. And that's the problem. People can't admit to their crap. You understand? And you know, you call a spade. And that's what it was. And so it gave me an opportunity to also address that. And I feel good about it, you know. And I must say that, you know, the relationship hasn't gotten any better. But, you know, for me, I feel relieved. I feel lighter. I feel, you know, victorious in this right now. Like you know, because I called you out. I'm letting you know that I know who you are. Like, I see you. I know who you are today, you know. And so, and that's with my own family. So, you know, we have the power. We can take back our power, and there are things that we are capable of doing that, you know, we couldn't even imagine, you know. You know, and I feel really good about that. If nothing else comes of that, I know this, that my soul is clean. You know, I am free. I am free from all of that, you know. So that's a good feeling.
That's the most important thing, that your conscience is clean, and they're the one that have to deal with that, because the truth, what they say, the truth will set you free. So
Absolutely.
You're free. You told the truth. So that's something that they have to deal with from now on, and then now on some more.
Okay, thank you.
But listen, for the listeners that just joined the show, you'll be able to hear it in its entirety, and not long. But for those that just joined the show, if you want to join us, the number is 646-929-2870. Press number 1 on your phone if you have a guest or a question. A question for our guest. Press number 1 on your phone and let us know, and we'll let you join the conversation. You know, I understand you taking notes, not something, and doing those type things, but, you know, we all can help and do something, and I know we all know somebody is going through some of these things, so don't be afraid to press number 1 on your phone and ask the question if you have one.
Absolutely.
Right. I'll put that one out there. So
absolutely.
I could see how everything that you've dealt with have brought you to Unbreakable Me, Still I Rise.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also see how that would open the doors for you for Our Voice Matters.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So Our Voice Matters.
Hold on 1 second. One second, Elizabeth. I got someone here. They got their hand up.
Okay.
254. You're on live.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, thank you for calling.
I just had a quick question. You were talking about how you had to get motivated to focus on recovery and get that going. And so my question is, for people who don't know what that means, what would you recommend for them to get motivated or recognize something within them to start feeling that way?
Okay. Is that a question for me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, what I said was, and I don't think motivating is a good, I think what I said was you have to want recovery. And And I think when it comes down to the recovery process, there's a spiritual element that goes with that, right? So as individuals, we're all different, right? We're all different. We all go through, whatever we go through, and we all have our limits. So I think this thing is more, and I think for me, it was more of a very, very personal decision. I mean, I don't know if motivation, because I was motivated to do, I mean, I didn't want to use drugs, right? I didn't want to, be in that position that I was in. And I always had that motivation to stop. The problem was I didn't have the will. And I didn't know, exactly how to do it. And so, for me, it took some trial and error, It took me, because, again, I tried to, recover, prior to, me being in recovery now. I went through a process. I went through, one of the recovery houses and stuff like that. And it took a lot from me because my addiction was stronger for me than me wanting to recover. So, it really depends on an individual, and what they want, because only they know when they're truly ready to stop, So, I mean, as far as motivation, I mean, there's meetings that people can go to, and everybody's welcome to go. We have group meetings, everywhere in the world today, and that could be something that could inspire someone. But yeah.
Did you have children doing? Did you have children already doing this, Elizabeth?
What do you mean?
I mean, were you trying to raise kids while you were going through the addiction, or you had kids after that?
No, I had kids, and when I was in my addiction, I think for me, and again, this is why I say there was a point in my life where, okay, even when I had my children and I was pregnant, like I was able to stop using, right? But the minute I had my children, and things went back, a little to normal for me, I went back out on that binge again. So I was very well aware of the damage, that I was doing. I was aware of the severity of what I was doing. And again, it wasn't the stopping. And I always tell people this in addiction. It's not the stopping about, stopping the drugs, stop using, because we can all stop using anytime we want. Nobody has to use dope. And like I went months, sometimes years, without using anything, and then I went back. But we don't focus on the stopping. We focus on the stay stopping, because that was my issue. I could stop for a period of time, but I couldn't stay totally abstinent from drugs and alcohol, and I always picked up where I left off. So I think it's really a personal decision. I got to say that, because everybody I know who's in recovery, it was always a bottom and a personal experience for them that brought them to that place where they surrendered and said, okay, now I'm ready and I'm willing.
Because we hear a lot about people that's suffering from addiction. They stop because something traumatic happened in their life. Either they have a really serious accident and they make a decision to stop, or they're tired of being resuscitated and they decide to stop, or they find religion and they decide to stop. Or, matter of fact, even their family, their kids, they decide, well, they use their children, for instance, as a motivating thing to kick it. So,
well, I did that too. But, yeah, and, that's the funny thing about addiction is very cunning, and very baffling, right? And I can tell you from experience and from people that I know that, and I know a lot of people in recovery today, that will tell you that none of those things were enough for them, to stay, away from using drugs or the use of drugs. And I have that experience too. You know, when you're trying to recover for the wrong reasons, it doesn't work. And I'm not saying your kids are not, they're the wrong reasons, but it has to be something that's personal in you. Because listen, I had kids. I had a mother. I had a family. I had people that cared. I have friends that cared about me, that really, wanted, I had they had my best interest. They wanted me to get help. But none of those things was convincing to me, right? It was something in me that happened that just, that light bulb went on one day, and it was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, and I think for me, it was literally a life and death thing. Those were the two options that I was left with at the end of my road, right? But again, I have to emphasize that everybody's, end of their road or everybody's bottom is different, right? Because it could take something like a jail sentence for somebody to say, you know what, I'm not doing this no more. So every individual is different, and it doesn't, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there, It doesn't matter what was the main factor in why you stop. It's the main thing is that you stop, right? So we kind of look at, it don't matter how you got here. It doesn't matter how you got in recovery, whether it was, you had an accident or, you went to jail or, you were resuscitated. There has to be something that has to be that light bulb that turns on inside your spirit, because at the end of the day, we all know this. If we don't know anything else, this is what we do know, is that the only place that drugs is going to lead you is jails, institutions, or death. We definitely know that. So those are the only three places that you can go when you're in addiction.
And drugs always win.
Oh, listen, they do if you let it. They do if you let it. I mean, we do.
Well, I was referring to the people that do drugs a lot casually, and they always say, well, I can stop whenever I want, because I'm controlling this. I'm in control. I'm in control of this.
Listen, that is the biggest lie that drugs can tell you, just like alcohol. That's a lie. That's the lie that we tell ourselves, to justify and rationalize our most outrageous behaviors while we're under the influence of those things, So we'll tell ourselves anything, and that's a lie, and I used to tell people, if you find yourself, and I used to tell, there was a friend of mine, right, that every time they drank, they winded up in jail, in an accident, and one day I said, did you ever think that maybe, you drinking might be the problem? No, I said, well, let me ask you this question. I said, every time you winded up in jail or winded up in a car accident, what were you doing? Right? And you know what? I was drinking. And I'm like,
but that wasn't the reason. But that wasn't the reason somebody ran out in front of me. That wasn't the reason.
You know what I'm saying? Exactly. So, the common denominator in that is what? The alcohol, right? And you. So. But we will. Listen, an addict, one of the things I always say is an addict, we are very manipulative, right? And we come up with these stories that I could remember. I could sit down even today and think of some of the stories I came up with, the lies. And I was like, wow. And when I think about them now, I'm like, oh, my God, I said that. And I knew people didn't believe me, but I said it anyway, right? So this thing here is something fierce, and we will do any, a person who is in an active addiction, listen, and I tell people this, and I know they don't want to hear it, but I tell them, listen, there's people in active addiction, they will rob their own mama, okay? That's a true story. They will rob you, and I don't care if your family, your kids, they will take from their kids. That's how bad this stuff is, And not saying it's the person itself, because I got to say that when you see a person who's in addiction and who's out there and you be looking at them and they're like, oh, my God, these people are off the train, they're crazy, they're robbing. Listen, please understand that that's not who you're not really seeing that person. You're seeing the monster that drugs and alcohol create, you know, because most of these people that are in this situation are really decent people. Like, you know, they're really good people. They just have this disease, and it is a disease. It is a disease.
I had a brother going through that at one period of time, but I had to whoop both their asses. The real person and the monster at the same time.
Yeah, I'm telling you, and that's the thing.
Hey, look,
you know,
I had to get
like,
both of them to make sure I got the right one.
Okay, I know that's right, because that's what happens. You know, we turn into these things. Like, you know, I mean, and I say things because when I look back at some of the things that I had done in my active addiction, and I used to struggle with that too until somebody really helped me to understand that, listen, you have to understand that wasn't you. You know, that's not the person you are today. Would you do that today? And that was the question that was posed to me. The things that you did back then, would you, when you were using drugs and alcohol, would you do that today in the place that you're in today? And I look at them like, hell no. I would never even think about doing something like that, you know. So, you know, I had to really look at and understand, you know, what it was that I was going through, because, you know, even when we get clean and sober, we can still suffer from the shame and the remorse and the guilt that we've done, you know, while we were in that state. And so I had to kind of rid myself of some of that to say, listen, you know what, I really was not responsible. You know, I really wasn't in my right mind, and I know I wasn't, because like I said, there is no way that I would have done any of those things right now today, the person that I am today. There's no way.
Right.
First of all, I would be too afraid, right? So, but, you know, that thing is a beast. You know, it brings out that peace in a person that, you know, we don't ever want to see. So yeah, it's horrible. Yeah.
Well, the blessing is you was able to survive, and you able to help some others that are lacking the ability and the strength that you've had, you know, to pull yourself up to do what you're doing now. So, hey, that's a great thing.
Well, you know, I think the key is for me, and this is what I try to give to other people is, you know, you have to dig deep, you know. You have to sometimes go backwards in order to go forward, right? So, you know, even dealing with these young folks, you know, we have to be able to give them permission and give them the what could I say, the security and without judgment. We have to be able to allow them to open themselves up to us without fear of reprisal, you know, without any of that stuff. Because some of these young folks, you know, have gone through and are going through the same things that I've been through in my life, right? And are afraid to share those dirty little secrets, you know, those secrets that keep us hostage, right? That we are, you know, that we're afraid of how people are going to look at us or talk about it. We have to get these, you know, and my thing is I think by telling my story to other people gives them permission, right, to tell theirs, you know, without being judged, without being looked at like, you know, they're from another planet, because, you know, they do get that sometimes. So when I share, you know, my story about being molested or being raped or whatever the situation, you know, has occurred in my life, you know, I always find one or two that'll turn around and pull me over and say, you know what, Miss Elizabeth, that happened to me too, you know, but I've never told anyone. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, so it's there's power in words and there's power in sharing, you know, these stories, you know, because it gives people the courage, you know, the inspiration, the permission to free themselves without all that other stuff that they're thinking about. What are people going to think, or should I say it, or afraid of somebody else going back and confronting. Because I always tell these kids too, listen, it's your choice whether you want to address it the way you want to address it, right? Because when somebody tells me something in confidence, it's in confidence. I don't cross any boundaries when people are sharing, especially kids, right? You have to give them the power to be able to do it themselves. You give them the support, you give them whatever it is that they need to get through that hurdle, right? But when someone tells me something, until they're ready to share it with someone else, it goes no further. And I believe that you have to build that kind of trust, with these children too. So, this is a powerful thing that we're talking about when it comes to. But again, you have these kids that are coming from homes like mine with addictive parents, with parents that are out there, they're smoking crack, they're doing all this stuff. These kids don't know how to react. And I'll tell you another thing. When I look at the juvenile justice system, it's very painful to see how these kids are put in these places, right, as an alternative, because, the thing is that these are bad kids, they're out of control of this. But what I know is that when I was that age, it wasn't that I was a bad kid, but the only thing I was trying to do was survive, okay? That was the way that was my survival mechanism, And so we have to learn how to distinguish when these kids are in survival mode or if they're just really just bad kids,
Right.
And most of the time they're in survival mode.
And then most of the time it's not bad kids, it's bad parents.
It's bad parenting, but it's also, again, they're trying to survive their environment, right? So if you have a parent, they're coming from a home where there's no food, there's no this, they're not getting the things that they need to go to school. What are they going to do? They're going to go out there and rob, right? They're going to go out, they're going to try to get whatever they got to get. And unfortunately, those are the ways that some of them do it, right? But it doesn't make them bad. Listen, they're trying to survive. They're trying to eat. They're trying to live. And so we have to look at that. It's not these are just bad kids. Listen, kids are not born bad. They're put in situations where they have to choose whether they're going to survive and try to have some kind of something, or they're just going to be, whatever. So, yeah, it's just a sad situation, but this is what's happening.
Yeah, but we're going to keep plugging away, and we're going to keep talking about it, and we're going to keep turning the light on those people so eventually everybody can see. Well, Elizabeth, quickly, we're down to the last couple of minutes. Tell everybody where they can go get your book and how they can get in contact with you.
Okay. Well, yeah, my book right now. So now we're out of stock on my book. I have the e-books are on Amazon, but they are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, and also if anybody needs to get in touch with me, they can always reach out to me through my email, which is ourvoicematters001@gmail.com, or you can just go on my Facebook. It's Elizabeth Graybill, and because I do a lot of responding on Facebook as well. So
we appreciate you, Elizabeth. You gave our listeners a whole lot to listen to, and everybody go support Miss Elizabeth Graybill. And like I was saying earlier, the show will be available in like 1 minute worldwide. So if you have problems finding the show, which you shouldn't have any problems finding the show, and as I like to remind you, to ask your mother, ask your daddy, ask the man across the street, ask the guy at the gas station, the milkman, the mailman, somebody should be able to tell you where to get the show so you don't have no excuse.
There you go. I like that. I like that.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us. We're going to continue pushing the message out there and continue the good work and continue doing what you're doing. And we will continue to support you on my end. And
thank you so much.
you got some new people on the West Coast pushing for you.
Well, I appreciate you so much, and thank you for, giving me an opportunity to share. And it's been really a great experience. Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been fun. Everybody,
thank you.
We'll see you guys next week. Same time, 2:30 PST. And I'm not going to tell you where they'll get the show at again because you already know that. So see you guys next week. Be safe and be conscious of everything that you do because every action has a reaction. You know what I mean? All right.
Absolutely.
Take care. See you guys next.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.